The Law of Hashut. Our first spell, Burning Wrath, is a magic missile, but not like any you've ever seen before. It has an upward trajectory and then comes down, explodes, and turns into a small vortex, which means it's designed to damage infantry, which is very different from the usual magic missile, which is great for sniping at lords and heroes and any single entity. And then there's an overcast version, which will spawn 3 vortexes on landing instead. It doesn't do a ton of armor piercing damage, so use it on lighter units, but it does cause fire and magic damage. So it can be useful just against a single unit of infantry, although to really make the most of it, they need to be quite tightly packed and in their full normal formation. Like this, where they're a bit spread out, it's maybe not so effective. And as mentioned, there isn't a ton of armor piercing, so if you use it on a unit of greatswords like here, who do have a fair bit of armor on, you can see it hits relatively well, kind of misses a little bit. Doesn't do a great deal of damage though, as you can see. And the overcast version can be nice if all 3 of your vortexes land well, but it's very easy for them to miss. So honestly, I wouldn't spend the 11 magic on it. Maybe using just the 6 magic single version is okay, but it doesn't seem a massively useful spell. I found it a bit underwhelming overall in terms of the damage it does, plus you have that RNG element of the vortex missing or going into your own troops, so not a spell I highly recommend personally. What will probably be more useful for 6 Winds of Magic is this spell, Dark Subjugation. -8 leadership, -24 melee defense, lasts 17 seconds, can be overcast to make it last longer, but overall this is just a fairly simple, useful debuff. Could just be used for the melee defense if you want at the start of a fight between 2 units, especially stronger ones, to help your unit win the fight, and ultimately to help your unit take less damage from said fight. But if you want to make use of the leadership debuff as well, it's going to be much better in the late game when things are near wavering. The loss of melee defense will make a unit take damage faster, which can lead to bigger leadership penalties, plus the -8 leadership, so you can hopefully route things a little bit sooner than you normally would. Overall, a good spell. It does its job, useful in many situations. If you catch a lord or something in a bad situation, you can reduce their melee defense, make them take more damage. There's plenty of good uses for this spell. The next spell we have is Ash Storm for 10 Winds of Magic, reduces speed by 25% and gives a 20% weakness to fire to all units in the area hex. It also can be overcast to extend the duration. Now this spell I think is one that really needs to work together with the rest of the army to maximize its potential. As you see here, I've cast this spell on a couple of units of cavalry and I've teamed it up with the suppressed ability from the Iron Demon. That's a 30% reduction to speed, so overall a 55% reduction to speed for these 2 units. And then I've also added the flammable weakness to fire from the Wolf Boy cavalry, so that's a 40% weakness to fire. So yeah, we're really maximizing what this spell can do, and of course you can team it up with more. If you saw my 200% damage video, you'll know all about this. I'll link that at the end if you didn't. That speed reduction can buy you some nice time to blast away at the enemy units with fire glaives or artillery and such. And as there is a lot of units with fire attacks in this army, it's pretty easy to take advantage of this weakness to fire that you can apply. You could perhaps use it in something like a frontline situation where the speed won't really help, but if you've got some units with fire attacks and there's maybe 2 or 3 that you could hit with this spell, and it makes all of them do 20% extra damage to the enemies they're fighting, that's always going to be useful. So a really nice spell, but it does have to synergize with other parts of the army. Next, we've got the Curse of Hashut. Now this one is very, very simple. It's fairly expensive for what it is. It's a direct damage spell. It's basically Spirit Leech. If you know how to use Spirit Leech, you know how to use this spell. It's direct damage to a single character, can be upgraded to last longer, but this is one you're just going to drop on the lords and single entities as much as possible. But do be aware with this spell, it's quite expensive for this kind of spell. 11 Winds of Magic compared to Spirit Leech's 8. And what you're paying for there is extra range. This spell has 200 meter range compared to Spirit Leech's 100 meter range. And that is useful if you want to try and get this spell off from farther away. But if you are quite close, you are then wasting the magic that you're spending on that extra range. So it's kind of up to you whether that bothers you or not, and whether you think the damage is enough from this spell to warrant wasting that magic on the unused range. Otherwise though, a simple direct damage spell. Next, probably the best spell in this lorebook in my opinion, Hellhammer. It does a lot of damage, it's very reliable as a wind spell, it goes where you tell it, although it is quite an expensive one at 16 Winds of Magic. It can be overcast for 22 Winds of Magic, which will make it go further. Another very simple spell to use, you've just got to find those lines of infantry that you can fully go through. Could be at the start of a battle before the enemy formation has moved, like so. Or when the enemy is engaged with your units and is kind of stuck in place. Goblins can be a good use for this, just to pin things down. They can line them up for you, and then you can nail them with the hammer. So very similar to something like Penumbral Pendulum, lots of damage as long as you can get that nice straight line to go through. Does cause fire and magic damage as well, so if you can imbue some fire weaknesses, there's even more damage to have. And our last spell of the day, Flames of Asgore. A very expensive one, but a very cool one all the same. It's a bombardment spell, but it's pretty much like a volcano's erupting and then these big lava-y bombs fly down and blow up everything in the radius. Said radius is quite big though, so it can be hard to fill in a lot of situations, but using something cheap and expendable like goblins who you don't mind blowing up a bit, that can be a good way to pin some units to try and fill up maybe half or 3/4 of the circle to get the most out of it. But of course, with how much the AI loves clumping up in this game in big battles, there may be some good situations where you can fill up the circle and it will do absolutely ungodly amounts of damage. So yeah, very nice, although it does depend how well you can fill up the circle and also what you're filling up the circle with. If you're filling it up with Skaven Slaves, it's probably not going to be that worthwhile for 18 Winds of Magic, but if you're filling it up with Storm Vermin, maybe it will be. But there we go, the lore of Hashut, a pretty good lore book overall, a very aggressive one, all about hurting the enemy in some way, not really about supporting or buffing your troops so much, but I guess that works for the Chaos Dwarves. I hope you've enjoyed this, thanks for watching, thanks to all the patrons who support this channel. If you'd like to become one, check out the link written at the top there or in the description. I'll see you in the future.